First breaking tonight, a huge win for President Trump and his crackdown on crime. A divided U.S. appeals court has ruled the president can send National Guard troops into Portland, Oregon, despite objections by the leaders of the city and the state.
Portland police rep posted a picture of a sunrise with the caption, "War-ravaged Portland, full of domestic terrorists." Oh, the sun rises in Gaza, too, but I don't want to live there.
All right, well, major breaking news and a big legal victory, not just for the Trump administration, but for the use of legitimate executive authority in America. How do you like that, No Kings protesters? Because today, a federal appeals court just ruled in Trump's favor by overturning a temporary injunction set forth by a woke district judge that was banning him from deploying the National Guard in Portland, Oregon. So in other words, Trump is now once again allowed to deploy the Oregon National Guard against the nonstop nightly trend we have seen of Antifa violence taking place on the streets of that city and especially outside of the local ICE facility. And it's worth noting too, the original basis, we covered this by the way, but for that judge's ruling was to say that, oh, well, you basically can't deploy the National Guard as the commander-in-chief if the governor doesn't accept it. And of course, the question is, what happens when this is literally the scene in Portland and the governor just says, no, I am an insurrectionist who's going to openly sponsor domestic terrorism against the federal government on the streets of my own city? I mean, is that not at the very least a basis to override her, if not directly charge her with sedition, which is probably really what should be happening in the state of Oregon? Well, again, this is why we have major news today. And according to insider sources, that National Guard deployment in Portland is now imminent, and I'm sure the protesters will not be so happy about that. That said, guys, we will get into it. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. That is the best way to support our work and ensure that we can keep doing these videos. And that said, so here's the information we'll read you from the Post-Millennial. A U.S. appeals court has ruled that the Trump administration can deploy Oregon National Guard troops to Portland. This comes after a district judge, as we talked about, blocked the administration from deploying both Oregon and other states' National Guard to Portland to help protect the ICE facility there that has seen nightly unrest. And that is true, by the way, nightly basis since June, which is to say, even before this became a major national story, they were already causing problems, and I'm proud to say we were one of the first channels to actually bring this issue to the forefront. But that said, you know, I want people to keep in mind that every time where Trump has deployed the National Guard without the governor's permission, because of the fact that there is the issue of federalism and overreach, all that they've done with that National Guard, especially, this is what they did in LA, for instance. They're not sending them around the city. They're not using them to institute martial law or some type of police. It is simply to defend and secure the federal facility where people keep protesting and people keep on rioting. So essentially, right? Again, when you see the situation in Portland, which we've covered extensively, the argument by both the Democrat governor and the liberal judges in this case was to say that you ought to just sit there and basically allow the violent Antifa, who we are sponsoring, to commit terrorism and in many cases try to assault, if not outright murder, the ICE agents. And how dare you try to use federal resources, aka the military, to protect other federal resources, aka the ICE facility. So, you know, it goes without saying that the case Trump's been making here was always completely legitimate. The Democrats were straight up lying, by the way. They kept saying, oh, he's going to send National Guard tanks around random neighborhoods. No, they were trying to secure and defend their own federal agents from your own terrorists. But of course, this is very important to understand. What is the logical outcome? What else are we supposed to conclude from the Democrat stance on this other than they want to encourage and they actually support the violence against ICE, right? Because you can sit there and broadly say, we condemn political violence, but also Antifa is peaceful and it's just an idea. But no, when you're crafting policy intentionally designed to incite violence against ICE agents, and then you kind of like deny it existed or even outright defend it when it actually happens, then clearly we know the agenda there. That's why I have been saying that these Democrat governments, especially in Portland, Oregon, have been sponsoring an insurrection against the federal government because they are directly involved here in supporting that violence. And, you know, you can conclude, I guess, what the outcome of that ought to be. But that said, here's the rest of that information. A divided three-judge panel of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit agreed to lift the lower court's order blocking the use of the Oregon National Guard. Now, interestingly, the judges wrote in their decision, after considering the record of this preliminary stage, we conclude that it is likely the president lawfully exercised his statutory authority under 10 U.S. Code Section 124063, which authorizes the federalization of the National Guard, quote, when the president is unable with regular forces to execute the laws of the United States. So again, isn't that so interesting? We keep on hearing that Trump's an authoritarian. You know, how dare he do this? He's overreaching his executive power. And yet even the appeals court said, no, actually, it's likely the president lawfully acted in his own accord. And here is the actual U.S. law being cited. By the way, that applies and is true of virtually everything that the administration is currently doing on immigration. But of course, these are people who are screaming that we are breaking the law or we're violating people's rights without even knowing what the law is or what rights those people even supposedly have. So isn't that very interesting? We're kind of being given like a law lecture by people who don't even know basic things, right? They don't even understand something as fundamental as the First or Second Amendment. But, you know, trust me, because we've never read the law, that's why the president is the bad guy for enforcing it. You know, these are the same people who believe, for instance, that the First Amendment protects their right to throw Molotov cocktails at the police, but apparently if you say something negative about like the trans community or immigration, that is a hate speech and that should not really be allowed. You know, that's inciting violence, whatever. But anyways, the ruling cited multiple violent events outside the ICE facility, which again are true and have happened. You know, Jimmy Kimmel and many others have tried. There's no chaos in Portland. Everything is peaceful. And yet, as we've pointed out time and time again, you notice how they're never there, right? Why isn't CNN, who keeps on saying, oh, there's nothing going on, why aren't they sending Caitlin Collins to the nightly situation at the ICE facility to see for herself, right? How can the national media sit here repeatedly and claim that everything is fine when they're not even there? Well, of course, we know the answer there. First of all, they want to cover it up. But secondly, one could argue they actually know what is going on and they're too scared to show up because they've seen what Antifa does to actual journalists. So all of that is happening and then they say it's peaceful because I never really checked it out. Yeah, sure. Okay. But again, that has happened, and the Portland police notably have done nothing about it. And further, would just like to point out, again, the president has the authority to federalize a National Guard when he is unable with the regular forces to execute the laws of the United States. Keep that in mind. Listen, Democrats, are you listening? Are you hearing it? Yeah? Are you seeing what's happening? Are you understanding why this is basic common sense and you guys are insane insurrectionists? No, they won't. Because they're in bad faith, right? They're supporting every bit of this, you know, and that's the agenda. And that's the reason why they keep fighting us in court and, you know, trying to, I guess, gaslight people about it. But here's what else gets very interesting. Ahead of the judge's ruling, rioters over the weekend attacked federal agents outside of the city's ICE facility. Again, we covered that yesterday about the No Kings protest. You're seeing it right there on your screen. We should really just keep this running the entire video so that way, you know, any point you click on, you can see, oh, No Kings was not peaceful. Oh, Portland is not peaceful. But anyways, so that has happened. At least 3 people were arrested. All of these people, by the way, as we also covered, were just immediately let out on no bail. So that's the Portland police for you. The order from the judges now. So now we're not right-wing conspiracy theorists. Now the courts are saying this too. Also said there has been a, quote, lack of support from the Portland Police Bureau, saying that the Federal Protective Service has had to rely almost exclusively on ICE and SRT for assistance in preventing violent protesters from attacking officers and the facility in which they work. Again, who tried to tell you that for like a month? Yeah. That's why you should subscribe to the channel, guys. But anyways, in late September, President Trump wrote, quote, at the request of the Secretary of Homeland Security, I am directing the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, to provide all necessary troops to protect war-ravaged Portland and any of our ICE facilities under siege from attack by Antifa and other domestic terrorists. I'm also authorizing full force if necessary. Thank you for your attention to this matter. So we got a lot more to talk about, but first of all, I do want to show you the hilarious reaction of MSNBC because they're not so happy, actually, that their paramilitary group of of domestic terrorists will no longer be able to basically act with full impunity. So take a listen.
It is a big deal, and I want to just correct one thing and then explain why functionally it is the same. This is a stay of Judge Immergut's opinion, and that's why it reached the Ninth Circuit as soon as it did, because this is an emergency motion to essentially pause her order. But as a functional matter, you are absolutely correct. It has the function of overturning her order and thereby allowing the president to send the National Guard back onto the streets of Portland. And Katie, I want to read, if I can, just from a little bit of the beginning of this 93-page opinion, which authorizes the federalization of the National Guard when the president is unable with the regular forces to execute the laws of the United States. And this is the important part. The evidence the president relied on reflects, quote, a colorable assessment of the facts and law within a range of honest judgment. We thus conclude that defendants are likely to succeed on the merits of their appeal. Basically saying that when and if a court considers all of the record in this matter is tried and it gets back to an appellate court through an ordinary process where they have full briefing and full evidence, that they still think Donald Trump is likely to prevail there because he has the discretion to determine as the president within a range of honest judgment when it is reasonable to deploy the guard.
This is what you and I were talking about last week. When you get into the slippery slope of discretion.
Yep.
Wow, discretion. That's an interesting word, Democrats. You mean to tell me that that power actually exists under U.S. law? And simply because Trump is doing something you don't like doesn't mean he is breaking U.S. law? Yeah, very interesting. Now, again, I just want to briefly recap here. What does this prove? Yes, indeed, the situation was violent. It is violent. We've talked about that before. Let's just keep that playing on the screen again so we can address all of the arguments about war-ravaged Portland and how that is indeed a completely real characterization of what is happening. But I do further want to hone in on the court's finding that the Portland police have, yes, indeed, basically done nothing to help because, you know, Governor Tina Kotek, for instance, of Oregon, previously had gone on camera, we covered this too, by the way, and talked about how we don't need the National Guard, or we don't need more federal agents because our local Portland PD are doing everything that they need to do, and I'm confident our locals can handle the situation. And, I mean, just look at this on the screen. They're clearly not. Okay, I think the argument can start and end there. But just to briefly recap, we have proven and established before not only that the Portland PD are doing a bad job of helping, it's their explicit stated police policy to stand down under the sanctuary city law and not help ICE. Hence why every single time you see videos like this, you ask the question, right? Where's the Portland PD? I mean, this situation is crazy. This is insane, right? You mean to tell me that the police won't respond? The answer is, of course, yes. And why is that? Because of this right here.
Now, earlier in the evening, ICE did give us a tour of this embattled Portland Federal Building. They showed us their brain room where cameras watch everything happening outside. Also, their rooftop where sniper teams provide security. ICE's Portland director, Kamala Wamsley, told me she's extremely frustrated with Portland police, as she says the Portland mayor and city council largely block police from responding to any violence at ICE's building. Take a listen.
They're not really supposed to respond to this building. There have been folks that have been assaulted right down here on the street, even across the street, and it takes Portland police a while to respond, or sometimes they don't respond at all.
Is that frustrating?
It is frustrating. It's frustrating for us to watch people be attacked on the street and know that we don't have the authority to be able to really step in unless there's some nexus to federal law. That's frustrating for us.
And last night we did see multiple verbal scuffles almost get to the point of physical confrontations, all while the Portland police liaisons were standing just across the street watching everything, but deciding not to intervene. And that, in part, is why President Trump has said he is sending the National Guard here to Portland. He says the locals aren't doing their job when it comes to protecting this federal facility, so he's going to send the military in. But as of this morning, as you can see, the National Guard not out here just yet.
Right, and again, as we pointed out before, the Portland police policies, essentially under the sanctuary city law, they don't want to even look like they're going to help ICE. So for many months, since this was all starting back in June, They would not even respond to 911 calls of the residents making noise complaints or reports of assaults. And then finally, once this became a national issue, as you heard, they started sending the Portland police liaisons. What exactly does that mean? I don't know. It sounds like kind of like a woke social worker thing, like the London police, where some of them don't carry guns, right? Oh, like we're the police, but not really. So they send the police there now so they can say to Trump and the rest of the country, oh, look, we have cops there. But as you heard and you've seen on these videos, time and time again, they don't actually intervene. They just stand off to the side and watch. And again, I repeat, this is actual Portland police policy. We're not talking about any isolated incidents. But if you still don't want to believe me, I bring to you a video we've also played before, but a prime example of exactly what we're talking about, which is the time just earlier this month when Antifa members assaulted a journalist by the name of Katie Daviscourt. And you can just simply actually just see the way that the Portland police respond in this video, just to get an idea of exactly everything being described right now in those court filings.
All right, so I have this assault suspect. I have the police guy following, so we're gonna see if anything happens.
Do not touch me!
Yes, Jansport backpack.
Do not touch me.
That one.
Do not touch me.
Her.
Do not touch me. No, I'm not. I am not.
I just said that you are. Stop.
I'm underage. Do not touch her. Do not touch her. Do not touch me. I am underage.
Yeah, and big surprise, but if you watch the rest, they literally just let her walk away. So, fantastic, amazing police work. I can't possibly imagine why Trump is making the argument that the Portland police are doing nothing. But yeah, again, prime example of everything we're talking about. You see it right there. That's apparently the policing they're doing. Hey, you're being detained. You're a suspect in an assault. No, I'm not. Don't touch me. Okay, bye. Have a good day, Antifa, right? So this is the very dark and violent nature of what's happening. I want people to understand this. Because on one hand, the Portland and Oregon government will explicitly tell their police to not do anything about Antifa, as you see in this video time and time again. On the very rare case that they make arrests to make it appear that they're doing something or there's some semblance of law and order, what do? Always immediately release the person, don't charge them, don't make them post a cash bail or anything, right? So that's the picture on one hand. The Portland police will not help federal agents. But then it's like, okay. So then Trump says, okay, if the Portland police are not going to help, then we're going to use a National Guard to help. Because someone needs to do security, and if police clearly aren't going to do their local job, even outside on the streets of Portland, then we're going to find other ways to protect the lives of federal agents. What do Democrat governors and mayors then do in response? No, we're not going to send our police to help you. But you also can't use the National Guard either. We're going to sue you over that. So again, what is the central conclusion of this? They want the ICE facilities to be unprotected, so that way scenes like you just saw on Saturday night can keep on playing out time and time again. That way Antifa basically has a raw line of sight and a massive ability to go and attack ICE and do whatever acts of domestic terrorism that they wish, which is, to put that a lot shorter, they are encouraging the violence against ICE agents, and that is clear in every aspect of their policy, right? It's just utterly insane. You're not going to send the police to do anything, but then you're also going to say Trump's an authoritarian for using the National Guard to try to secure this facility. Okay? The last point I like to make is that although leftists thought they had a temporary legal victory, which clearly now they even don't on this National Guard issue, very soon the good news is that this is not going to matter. Because if you may remember from the big beautiful bill, ICE has received massive amounts of funding. It's about to be the size of basically the world's fourth largest military. And you may have heard some talking points about this, that Democrats are claiming, oh, this is Trump trying to build a private army, right? His own private army. And while, there's kind of like a nature of just libtarded rhetoric to it, there's also a lot of truth in it, to be honest with you, in the sense that, yes, Democrats, be very careful about this issue. Be very careful about which legal victories you try to tout, because very soon we won't even need National Guard. You know why? Because ICE agents, there will be enough of them where they can both carry out legitimate immigration operations and do crowd control and do security at the same time, because there's going to be so many of them. It's going to take time to hire and process everyone, maybe a few years, but once it gets to that point, this is no longer going to be a problem. Okay, let me just say that right now. But again, there you essentially have it, guys. Big victory all around. The Democrat insurrection takes one step back, although we need to be doing a lot more, obviously. But it is a process. And that said, guys, let me know your thoughts on this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.